and welcome to Interviewing Innovators, a series by Render Product Development. My name is Manaíra Lacerda, I am Render's marketing assistant, and today I'm going to talk to Lee Fitzpatrick about the steps you should take when marketing a new product. Lee is a fantastic strategic brand builder and the managing director of Outlaw Social, a Scottish marketing agency focused on branding and creative content. Hi Lee, and thank you so much for being here.
Hey Manaíra, good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So Lee, as we do have like a short space of time here to talk about that, I would like to go straight to the point. What is the most important thing, in your opinion, to have in mind when promoting a new product?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, or what we do at Outlaw, we really focus on going back to marketing basics, so the fundamentals that I think, unfortunately, over the past 10 years, we've kind of lost in the world of digital because people have been focused very heavily on tactics, so social, digital, paid advertising, all that sort of stuff. We've kind of forgot one of the most important things about marketing, and the clue's actually in the name. So the market. Mm-hmm. So as marketers, I believe that our priority is to understand the market. And what I mean by that is to make sure that we understand the customers that we're trying to serve with our product or service. And actually one of the things that I say to people quite a lot, the most important thing before we move on to any tactics or strategy is actually to embrace a little bit of humility as a marketer. So to understand that you're not the customer that you're trying to serve, you're actually quite different to them. And that actually there was a study that came out by a company called Think TV, sorry, and they took basically a survey with advertisers, and then they asked the same question to the general public, and it was focused on what social channels that they use the most. Mm-hmm. And there was quite, like, the advertisers spent a lot more time on social media than the actual general public. Oh. But then what they asked is they asked the advertisers, how much time do you think the public spend on social media channels? And there was a massive assumption gap. Advertisers thought that the public spent way more time on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn than they actually did spend. So that brings me on to probably my next point, and it's being market oriented is really important. So taking the time to understand the customers, and one of the best ways to do that is through market research, which you'll know a lot about.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's lots of ways that you can do market research. Qualitative stuff like focus groups and things like that, and then quantitative stuff like surveys, going to the wider market, taking a representative sample of the market. But actually, some of the best research is just getting out and speaking to your customers. See, like, depending on what your business is, if it's B2B or B2C, but getting out into their environment and observing them, seeing how they respond to your product, your service, how they go about their daily lives. And market research is actually something that a lot of marketers and businesses skip because they're so excited to get their great product to market. Yeah. They actually forget about making sure that the market needs or wants it. So that would be my first thing. And after you're focused on the market and you've done your research, the next important thing is, for me, is what is known in the industry as segment, target, and position, and it's often referred to as the Holy Trinity. So what that means, really quickly, is you need to understand what the total available market looks like, and you can take that from your research, because if you do good research, you'll understand what the different segments of the market are. And once you understand the market, then you can decide who you're going to target. So there'll be different segments that represent different value, or maybe slightly different difficulty to reach. But then you can take a slice of the pie and position your business, your product, your service to exclusively serve the most lucrative part of the market first. And I think that's, like, in simple terms, businesses often try and target the whole market, but actually they'll find that there will be certain parts of the market that are the most lucrative. And as you know, in product development, will become the early adopters, which is really important for getting traction. So yeah, I think segment, target, and then position your brand to exclusively serve a particular part of the market.
And Lee, about budget, how do you think the marketing activities involved in taking a new product to market can be budget? How to do that?
Great question, and a really important one, because what I find as a marketer is there's often this friction between marketers and companies where there's not an open conversation about budget. People are quite scared to share their budget, but actually it's a really important part to getting the most out of your marketing. The first thing I would say is that if you do the fundamentals first, so if you do your research, you understand the segment you're trying to target and your positioning, that should give you a good understanding of the amount of money that you might need to spend to successfully reach that target. But there's quite a lot of data. So we're big fans of a paper that was produced a few years ago called The Long and Short of It. And that basically that was produced by the IPA, so that Institute of Practitioners of Advertising, and it was a report that's based on 30 years of data on advertising effectiveness case studies. So I think there was about 1,000 case studies that were analysed. And what came out of that, one of the key takeaways is this split between spending your budget on longer term kind of broad reach brand building campaigns and shorter term sales activation. So the kind of things that drive sales. And what came out as the golden ratio across all of the case studies was 60-40 split. So to spend 60% of your budget on longer term brand building activity and 40% on the shorter, more tactical sales activation. Now, obviously that varies from business category, type of business, that sort of stuff. And I think you need to apply a bit of common sense to that, particularly with new products or startups. I think what you'll probably find is it'll lean slightly more towards putting more budget into sales activation to get that initial traction. But what I would say is over time, the data shows that the more you can get the majority of your budget on longer term brand building campaigns, the more successful they'll be. What came out of this study as well is the biggest contributing factors to brand growth. Number one was brand size. So how big your brand is. Now, unfortunately, for smaller companies or new products, there's not really anything you can do about that. It's unfortunate. But the second contributing factor, and the most important one, was creativity. So the ability to be creative and to stand out in the marketplace is one of the biggest drivers of brand growth. And what you find is if you're focusing all of your time on sales activation, so kind of paid advertising, email marketing, that sort of stuff, it's actually quite hard to be creative because you're focused on the data and the numbers. Whereas if you think about brand building activity, so that this would be things like TV campaigns, billboards, print advertising, radio campaigns, fundraising, charitable donations, all that sort of stuff. It feels much more creative, and you've got an ability to really kind of step outside and be more creative. So yeah, I think it's about the balance. Don't just accept sales activation as the only tactic. Challenge your assumptions. That's what I would say.
That's perfect, Lee. Thank you again for the interview. I'm sure you brought you brought loads of valuable information that will inspire our audience. I just would like to share as well the best way for people to find you and Outlaw Social online on the internet. What's the best way to find you?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So, best way to find the company is just our website. So it's outlawsocial.co.uk. It's currently a landing page, but we've got a new website in development. If you go onto any of our social channels, you'll see that we also do a weekly email called the Friday Huddle, which we usually just rant, but I think there's some useful information in there. And if anyone wants to follow me on LinkedIn, it's just Lee Fitzpatrick. So I'd love to connect with people. Yeah, but thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Amazing, thank you. So I'll leave all the details in this video's description. I hope you've enjoyed today's interview. If you like, please feel free to give it a like or a share. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below or send us a DM. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again soon.